Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Rhoda Robinson. I am the Executive Director for AC Health Initiative. AC is a development organization focused on empowering and supporting the underserved population in Nigeria, and we work in over 13 states across the country on health, empowerment, and rights issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to pitch in very quickly that AC Health is the reason we are here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Ogunshola. Currently, I serve as CEO at AFRICANXT Development Technologies Limited. We're a technology solutions company, and we build technology solutions for both government services, development partners, and private sector organizations. Aside of that, I'm engaged in a few non-profit activities focused on bridging economic livelihoods through digital skills.
every year, every single year, 3 million girls are estimated to be mutilated for non-medical reasons. This is what the World Health Organization says. And so our work, and I don't mean as an health agency, I mean everyone sitting in this room, is to begin to consider how can we work together to end this? How can we leverage technology to end this? And that's why I'm glad that we are having this conversation. So I'll come to Rhoda first of all. You've been on the field, you've done a lot of research. What is the situation like with FGM? Now I know we say FGM, and to a lot of people, it might sound abstract. Can you break it down for us and help us to understand what is the situation now? How we do it?
Thank you, Timmy. So when we're talking about FGM, as Timmy has said, it's a mutilation of girls, and it is basically the partial or total removal of any parts of a female's private part. So it's a traditional practice that has been going on for years, decades, and it's a violation of the rights of women and girls. As she said as well, globally we have over 200 million cases of female genital mutilation. Nigeria alone accounts for 10% of that number, which means that more than 20 million women and girls have been mutilated in Nigeria. And this is not a far-fetched or an imagined number, an exaggerated number. Every single day, girls are born in local communities, in cities, in towns, in homes. This traditional practice keeps on going, and these girls are at risk of being caught. In Nigeria, Haiti is currently implementing the Stop Cop project, where we are looking at the practice of FGM in 3 of the states with the highest incidence of FGM, that's Osun, Oyo, and Ekiti states. And in this state, we have current practices of girls under the age of 14. More than 30% of them in this state are still have undergone FGM and are still undergoing FGM. And when you look at the thought process or the beliefs behind the continued practice of female genital mutilation, you find that it does not justify the harm, both medical, mental, psychological, social harm that this practice brings to young people.
One of the issues with FGM is that, as I said when we were discussing, that it's such an archaic tradition. It's like the way they used to kill twins in like 100 years, a century ago. That's really how it is. So it's an archaic tradition that is still living with us centuries after. And good or bad, the interventions are also not necessarily the most modern interventions. We have the same things we've been using for decades now. Most of it is engaging, because it's done at the local level. So first of all, engaging the cutters themselves. Several things have been tried. A lot of times, initially, it's to find what works. So you engage them, you try and substitute their income. So the money they make from cutting these girls, you can provide them skills to be able to do other things so that they can leave that practice for it. That is done, but it's not the most successful of practices because a a lot of times it's a traditional thing, so it's so embedded. So those women see it as a justification for it, So there's a lot of justification for it because you can give a woman, teach her how to sew, she starts sewing in her backyard and making money from it. But then the mother of a 2-year of a brand new baby girl will come and meet her and give her more money to just make sure that her daughter is caught. So that has been found to be very successful. But at least there's still, in some communities, it works. It has been seen to work. Then the other thing around it is, we also have, just in my mind now. When you engage them, they now have this oath whereby they put up their razor blades and all and take there's what's it called? The pledge. It takes some kind of pledge, and it's a formal thing whereby they are kind of I won't say they swear, but at their community level, when you take that kind of oath, especially by the time you engage traditional rulers and everything, with that kind of strong stakeholder engagement at the lowest level, then they are not meant to go back there. So really, the only thing we do is engaging those people who are the actual cutters and making them put down their blades. That's the main thing. Second thing is that enlightening the community, and telling the parents why this is not beneficial, continuous advocacy, engagement at community level, high-level stakeholder engagement, the parents themselves. There's something that I think is also now pretty, at least somewhat, cannot be 100% effective, but we have seen that engaging the young girls themselves. Okay, so a lot of times they're going to be caught when they are younger. But we've seen there's a lot of, which is where I think digitalization is good, because there's a lot of impact in young girls, 10 and below, being educated on this in their classrooms, at community events, they themselves advocating for themselves. I think that strategy has been used in the last few years, and it's going to be, really for me, the most successful and sustainable strategy to be able to end FGM. Because if that generation understands why it's not good, why it's not useful, and why it's a barbaric practice, then going forward, we will see it anymore.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amaka. Now, quick announcement, if you have any question, probably somebody has said something and it just struck a chord, and you want to ask questions, please note them immediately after this first round of questioning. I'll come to the audience and take your questions before we go ahead.
I think technology, we need to think about technology first as an enabler. And so all of the different methodologies and approaches being used in terms of either high, senior level, stakeholder engagement, or engaging the younger generation to then start to speak up about these issues. Technology creates an opportunity to be able to expand that communication, to be able to ensure that it can reach more people. However, when we think about technology, I think it's important to also define the fact that it's not just smartphones or the internet. Then you have like small future phones that can do SMS and calls, because some people would argue about the fact that there's still very low level of internet penetration in very remote and rural communities, and so it's almost impossible that people in that community would see a YouTube video or see some form of Facebook message. However, we all know that almost every community has future phones. Somebody has a phone that can send an SMS and can receive a call. And so there's small scale type technology solutions like USSD. So same way, for example, in agriculture, we've been able to use technology to drive farmer extension services, where farmers subscribe to a service and then they get messages and feedbacks and all that. We can build an entire service that starts from advocacy, enlightenment, and awareness that goes on to possibly even tracking and monitoring, where in a particular community people can then report cases where if they've all collectively agreed on something, you can then track how many incidences, and that's important in gathering data that can then be used to actually carry out follow-up activities, all the way to building incentive structures. Yes, it's she mentioned some little bit about incentive structure, which is teaching people a new skill set that can help to ensure that they have a new means of livelihood. But incentive structure could be around, for people who, for example, are reporting cases. How do they get, rewarded? It could be airtime, it could be certain voucher that can be redeemed somewhere, certain codes. So I think that, when you look at the entire, I would say, landscape, so from the awareness to enforcement if there is, all the way to other forms of activities. Technology plays a significant role. And then for communities that have access to internet, whether it's medium or high speed internet, which is also a lot of communities. Then there's a lot of messaging, targeted ads, and programs that can be built on the internet to reach these select communities. Non-profits like AC could build mobile applications and web applications that then help to either engage local canvassers and a community of people, as well as also then deliver on this last mile learning. So when she spoke about the classroom, for example, looking at school systems, there's a lot of ongoing digital skilling programs that are happening at the very last mile in public schools, in private schools. How do we then find some way to collaborate with these other existing programs and put those contents within already existing platforms? Because you also have a lot of existing platforms that are used for e-learning. So you have your U-Lesson, you have a number of popular platforms to do that already. So how do you get this content on that platform? And then how do you get the necessary data to understand how many people are consuming this content, how many people are reacting to it, where, when, what questions are people asking, and all that. But I think that we need to think about technology as an enabler to already existing efforts, to help to scale those efforts, either to very remote areas or to already urbanized centers. And there are multiple forms and dimensions of technology, depending on what type of community and depending on what the level of literacy, depending on what type of technology and internet connectivity is available within those communities. But definitely technology can help to scale the fight. Technology can help to increase awareness, both with victims or survivors, as well as parents, as well as even with other stakeholders and partners that will be able to join the fight to increase the adoption or the end to FGM.
Really love to hear from people who are in this room. Okay, so I've got one hand here. If someone could please assist me to pass the microphone to the lady who raised her hand, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So yes, if she asks a question and it spawns another question in your mind, please feel free to raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I've seen some comments online that kind of try to diminish the harmful impact that FGM has on ladies by kind of comparing it to male circumcision, which happens at birth. But I'm not well educated enough to really, fight back at that. So my question is, how would you respond to such a person that compares female genital mutilation with the male circumcision? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Your name, please?
Mayowa.
Thank you very much. Brother, funny enough, this was what we were discussing just before we came up, and I think this is your question, and anyone who wants to pitch it is free to.
It's difficult if you're not a medical personnel to understand the anatomy of a woman, right? But definitely, it's really to educate yourself to understand. And when you do, because obviously the internet has everything now, when you see the anatomy of a man and the anatomy of a woman, you realize that the part that is being excised in a man is completely, science has found it's not very useful. Foreskin, it doesn't have any use. But the part that is being excised in a woman is a very fundamental part of the female anatomy for pleasure during sexual intercourse. But for the man, the foreskin is not needed at all, So that is often, that's the misconception normally out there. As you said, it's because people, first of all, who really wants to go and look at a female anatomy? Why would you be Googling that? It looks a bit strange, But it's for you to know that there are different parts of a female's anatomy, and that the clitoris, if I use the word, here, that is being removed, is not an unuseful part of the woman's body. Instead, it's fundamental to our sexual pleasure. And beyond sexual pleasure, let's not just make it sexual pleasure, the procedure itself is dangerous because of where they are cutting. It often leads to, we've not talked about the danger of it, The man's the foreskin of that is removed in the man is on top of his reproductive organ. But the part that is removed in the woman is right on top of her urethra, where her urine comes out from. So the issue is that most times when that place is cut, the urethra too gets damaged. And when that happens, she cannot urinate, she gets infections, it affects her reproductive organ. So it's a different procedure entirely. And let's put that.
Just to add to what Dr. Amaka has said, apart from the anatomical differences when it comes to female genital mutilation, we are looking at how much negative effects it actually has on the woman. Now, when you're looking at female genital mutilation, there are different types. There are one that cuts just the clitoris, then there are the ones that cuts the labia majora and the minora. That's the lips of the vagina. You understand? And then, so you are looking at cases where it's either they cut everything off, or they sew it together, or they cut part of it. And this leads to issues where you have, as you said, infection, high risk of infection. There are issues with the reproductive tract. It could even lead to reproductive difficulties having sex in future or giving birth in future. Now, if you are comparing that to male circumcision, just because you put the word circumcision after female, you are doing a grave injustice to women and girls who have to live every single day battling with the negative effects of this practice being done on them. You are doing a great injustice to women who are struggling with obstructive fistula because of the kind of procedure that was done on them and because of the infection that they had when these procedures were being done. So there are vastly two different things. And you don't have to try and justify that just because male circumcision is allowed, female circumcision should be allowed, or that there are some that don't cut off everything. The procedure itself is wrong. It's against the rights of the girls, it's against the rights of women, and it has absolutely no benefit whatsoever. There are no religious backing to it. There are no, on either side, on Muslim side or Christian side, there is no justification or laws to support the continuation or practice of female genital mutilation.
Alright, thank you very much. I think I'll just take it from there. If anybody has any question, I'd love to see hands. Okay, as we move the microphone over to the back, just, taking a cue from what Rhoda said, you were saying that it is not right, and it is also unlawful. It is against Section 34 of the Nigerian Constitution. It is against, the different laws in Nigeria. For example, in states like Oyo State or Osun State, Ekiti State, they have their own states, apart from the Constitution, that say that this is wrong. So it is inhuman.
We are here, I would say, based on our technical expertise, and research, because female genital mutilation is something that is done in many countries. India, a lot of countries. And really, we only work from research and what has been seen in the field. And across all these countries, what research and data is showing is that, unfortunately, majority of the girls, there is some kind of harmful outcome of the procedure. I'm with you in saying that, yourself and your sisters were quite lucky, and I think that's good. There are also many ladies like you who don't know they were ever circumcised. But as I said, we're going to be working a lot with research and the data that we have, because for every 10 girls that are circumcised, 8 have harmful consequences after that. So that's the challenge. Yes, it's a cultural practice and it's ingrained in families. But when you have a practice that, even though it is done, it's like child marriage, for instance. A lot of young girls are married young. Some of them are married at 60. My mom got married at, 17, 16. And she's fine today. But some other girls got married at that age. And they've had issues giving birth. They've had, all sorts of issues. So yes, it's a practice that we do. It is ingrained in our communities. But I guess the question here is that how useful is it? What is it really contributing to us significantly? And if the numbers showing that the effects are so detrimental, are so high, then why should we continue? So I'll leave it there.
We've had talks with different communities where the reason behind the continued practice of female genital is because they want to keep the purity of the girls. or it's because of one myth or the other, that they are afraid that something might happen to her in the future, or it might affect her being able to have a happy home, or be able to satisfy her husband sexually, or give birth to male children, or different kind of ideas, different kind of beliefs surrounding the practice. So we are looking at it, apart from the detrimental effects that girls have to go through because of this practice. And as you said, you turned out beautiful, your sisters turned out beautiful, and that is wonderful. But there are so many girls out there who do not have that kind of positive stories to tell. There are so many young mothers who have had to deal with the after effects of this practice being carried out on their own daughters, on their own babies, because something went wrong, or they didn't understand it properly, or they realized late that it wasn't really necessary. So looking at the whys behind the practice is as important as understanding what it does to a girl or a woman when she grows up. And that's the kind of perspective that we are coming at female genital mutilation. And as I said, if it's not necessary, why should we continue? Why should we keep putting girls at risk every single time? Because we are trying to hold on to a tradition that is no longer serving a purpose.
How do we get more young people, to use available digital technology, or to be able to think of innovative technologies to fight against, female genital mutilation? How do we get more young people involved in reporting and prevention? How do you suggest that we could go about this? And then I'd like to hear from Rhoda as well. Or Rhoda, do you want to go first?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question, right? But when you get to the part of how do you get more young people to use technology to fight FGM, I think it starts on the very point of even knowing what you're fighting for, ultimately. And I think Maiwa asked the question around knowing how best to respond. So, for example, she's on social media, she's on the internet, she finds people posting, particular comments, she wants to be able to respond. That's technology. So it starts from the very bottom of awareness. I think that either organizations need to come together, organizations who are doing this work, non-profits, development partners, technology organizations, multinationals, need to be able to fund an active campaign that creates a lot more awareness among younger people who have access to technology. And this could be in form of a campaign or an online campaign, a application. What I've seen also to work with campaigns is, especially with Gen Z and millennials, which are the generations where, either we're in or the very just immediate generation. Incentivizing that process also, because we need to recognize that they could be doing other things with their time, with same technology. They could be building startups or building solutions, edutech solutions. So the question is, why advocate for it? And that's typically, while it might sound like, it's a big issue, it's a society problem, I think the government has resources to do that. But if we start thinking about getting more young people actively involved, either passively or actively, we need to think about how do we incentivize the process using technology. And this incentive, I'm not saying, pay people, it could be, for every time you make a post about this or you share this, you get maybe one X point or some point. It could be a blockchain-backed project, for example, with a coin, an FGM coin. And these are just random examples. And every time you make a post about it or you share videos in your platform, you get 0.00001 token. And you can convert this as a gift card somewhere, or you can use this as something. So we need to think creatively outside of the box, to think about the demography that we want to approach and speak to. But what's important is, how do we get them to first learn about it and learn about, the significance, and both arguments. Because for you to be able to also advocate for something, you need to have both sides of the argument. You need to have the argument for, the argument against, and be able to make an informed decision as to, okay, I think, like she said, based on data, I think this necessarily might not be great practice. Just like she mentioned, killing of twins. It was great at some point, it was seen as taboo, but eventually someone was able to convince them that this wasn't the case. But right now, I think that advocacy and learning needs to happen using technology drive that advocacy. I think there needs to be some incentive structure built around it, either in the form of recognition or just some incentive structure that helps young people involved. I think that beyond young people, there's a lot of technology organizations that, if they quite understand why, the why behind the campaign, might just be able to support, a lot more. And so that's where the necessity for collaboration.
Thank you, Joe.
Generations change, the mode of communication changes every single time. So for this generation to be able to effectively communicate with the person in their own circle, they need to be able to use the platform that they are familiar with, they respond to better, and use that to communicate the messaging. And as Dr. Amaka also said, sometimes it's technology doesn't get to the rural communities, doesn't get there. But people get there. And if these people, the young people who have access to the technology, have access to information online, have access or know-how about digital technology, are able to understand the process, they can get this information from online into those communities because they have easier access to those things and they'll be able to propagate the message better. One of the key things about female genital mutilation is that it is done for non-medical reasons. It is not done to fix a problem. You understand? There are different procedures that fix problems, but it is solely for non-medical reasons. So if it is done for medical reasons, it is not female genital mutilation. Do you understand? The media is very key because the media reaches everywhere, not just radio, television, newspapers, they reach everywhere. So getting in touch and building the capacities of media to actually respond and provide the right kind of information is key in ensuring that people know more about female genital mutilation. And as an organization, AC is working actively with over 60 media organizations, media houses across the states that we're working to ensure that they understand that they're able to provide the right kind of information. We are also doing TV adverts, we're also doing radio adverts to make sure that people understand that FGM happens, FGM needs to stop, and why it needs to stop, and what they can do to support that cause.
Alright, so now we'll take the 30 seconds closing remarks, just as we agreed. Just final thoughts from the panelists. Who wants to go first?
Okay, so I think most of my final thoughts have been thought away.
Alright.
But basically, what I just need to say is that everybody has a role to play, and it doesn't matter how small you think it is extremely important. As John has said, you can either be passively engaged or actively engaged, but as long as you are engaged, we are taking a step further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. For me, again, it's the fact that technology is an enabler. So whatever you think about, technology has the ability to scale that thought and that activity. And so let's just innovate away.
Thank you, Dr. Amaka.
All right. I think since I'm representing UNFP here, I'll say that FGM is, and it has more. It's not a practice that should be endorsed by any community or anyone. And as an agency, we're actively working to eliminate the practice, and it's so that we have a generation of young girls that actually have a choice when it comes to their sexual health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to really appreciate the panelists. Thank you so much to Rhoda, to Joel, to Dr. Amaka, and very importantly, thank you for Haiti Health Initiative. Thank you so much to you for bringing this conversation to the front corner so that we're talking about this. I'm sure that it has been impactful. Am I correct? Yeah. Okay, great. I'd like to know that it has been impactful. We'll take pictures. And once again, thank you to everyone who came in.